Welcome to the Republican Professor. Good morning. It's 21 August 2025. It's a Thursday in the Southland. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. Today is Uncle Tom Luckey's funeral. It's going to be at Antioch Baptist Church in Humboldt, Tennessee. My wife and I both have burial plots there, and it'll be on YouTube. It'll be on the Antioch Baptist Church YouTube channel. Not live, but posted after. Uncle Tom was a fan of the Republican Professor, and we miss him very much. So, in honor of Uncle Tom, I'm wearing the Lucky Barn hat you see on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, you're not going to see it, but it's a beautiful hat. Thank you for the Lucky Barn hat. Faye is in our thoughts and prayers, and she runs the Lucky Barn there in that area. Um, Tom leaves a massive hole there in Humboldt, and so this episode is dedicated to Uncle Tom Luckey of Humboldt, Tennessee. We're continuing in our discussion of why Gorsuch is wrong in Bostock versus Clayton County, why he's wrong on transgenderism and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Yeah, this is where we're at. We're in A on page 1745 of the Supreme Court reporter, not the U.S. reports. We discussed the pagination is wrong on Google Scholar here. As far as what's on along the top there, that's the U.S. reports, but they're not giving you the U.S. reports pagination. They're giving you the Supreme Court reporter pagination. We've covered up through A here in Gorsuch's Roman numeral 3. And you can get there by and follow along by going to Google Scholar, go to case law, go to federal courts, and then search Bostock versus Clayton County. There you go, clicky little wiki. Then just scroll down. You got to scroll way down to 1745. Another way you can do it is just search 1745 until you see the page number. There it is right there. And we're in A. So here's Gorsuch. Maybe most intuitively, the employers assert that discrimination on the basis of homosexuality and transgender status aren't referred to as sex discrimination in ordinary conversation. I'm going to hammer on this again. We're going to hammer on it until you get it. Transgender status. What triggers that status? Gorsuch doesn't tell us. And a lot of people won't ever discuss it because they don't know. There is no answer to it. There's no legal answer to it. It's made up. It's made up. Homosexuality is not made up. It's been around for a long time. Um, the issue of that situation that people find themselves in uh, is well known for going back thousands of years. This issue of transgender status is a new term, and that's why he has to put the word status there. Notice he doesn't put the word status next to homosexuality. He doesn't put homosexual status. He doesn't put it next to women, a women's status. He uses this term status to give it a a feeling as if it's some kind of official legal designation. And it's what they call in gambling, they call it a when you have a poker face, you're bluffing. It's a bluff. There is no status that's legally identified. And I mean, if there is, then what is it? Isn't it just what someone says? What exactly is it? Is it some complicated process that you have to document? If so, tell us about that process. What exactly goes into that process? Is it is it a process that you just made up? Or, what are you basing this on? The idea that someone can change genders is new, and it seems to be very flimsy here. Now, that is a separate point, separate but equal. LOL, political science jokes. From the point that this has something to do with the 1964 Civil Rights Act language of sex discrimination. That's entirely separate but equal. If asked by a friend, says Gorsuch, rather than a judge, why they were fired, even today's plaintiffs would likely respond that it was because they were, here's that word, gay or transgender, not because of sex. According to the employers, that conversational answer, not the statute's strict terms, should guide our thinking and suffice to defeat any suggestion that the employees now before us were fired because of sex. But this submission rests on a mistaken understanding of what kind of cause the law is looking for in a Title VII case. All right, before we move on, I'm going to go back up to the previous paragraph and talk about this term gay. It's also a strange term. It means happy, cheerful, right? You guys know this, right? If you look up Noah Webster, 1828, it's an old dictionary that's online now, and it reflects the English language, I think, pretty well. And if you clicky little wiki on that, you're going to pull up a possibility of searching for the word gay, which I just did. Let's load that. It means merry, jovial, sportive, frolicsome, and so on. Why are you using the word here? It's manipulative. It's manipulative. You mean homosexual. That's what you mean. The word gay takes the focus off of the word sexuality, which is in the term homosexuality. We talked about this last time. Heterosexuals do not try to make themselves more powerful as a group by separating the men and the women into different letters. And see how many we are. Look how many coalitions we have. Um, uh, we're not manipulative like that. Um, there is a manipulation here. It has to do with the way the language is used. You just have to be on the lookout for it. And I think in this context, it's a little bit strange because the word sex is in the term homosexuality. And we are talking about sex discrimination. So it seems a little odd that you would not favor the term, which is clearly textually related to the text of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Um, Notice the term transgender does not have the term sex in it. And so I want to point out to you that this term transgender, first of all, refers to a condition that it doesn't seem to be possible And if it is possible, it's not clear exactly what triggers it, what triggers the status, as he calls it. Being homosexuality is a matter of the way it's defined. I mean, I think you could. I'm not sure. I'm gonna search homosexuality on this homosexual. Let's see if I've never done this before, so let's see if Webster's has uh, no results found. Okay. Well, it definitely was understood. There were words for it in Greek and in Latin. Um, Certainly was something that not was not called gay. Um, but the idea of transgender did not exist because people didn't think you could just change your gender. By the way, we're assuming gender and sex mean the same thing here, which according to transgenderism is false. So this gets us very confusing. If you're not spelling out how this works, it's very confusing for employers to try to figure out how they're going to comply with this law. How exactly do you do that? If someone reports that they're homosexual, that condition is well known for thousands of years. That's one thing. The entire other thing is if someone says, I'm a new gender now, I changed gender. Well, that hasn't been known for thousands of years. In fact, it's not known today. We are aware of people pretending. Is that what's going on? Are you lying? Are you seriously thinking that you are different gender now? If so, why? Um, to say that you can't even have that discussion in a workplace where it's possible that someone's lying about their gender and lying is relevant to employment decisions is precisely what people are worried about here. The law is supposed to be more coherent than that. So let's continue. In conversation, Gorsuch says, second paragraph of A speaker is likely to focus on what seems most relevant or informative to the listener. So an employee who just has been fired is likely to identify the primary and most direct cause rather than list literally every but for cause. To do otherwise would be tiring at best, but these conversational conventions do not control Title VII's legal analysis, which asks simply whether sex was a but for cause. Now, notice here, he says whether sex was a but for cause. And we've pushed back on this. I'm going to continue pushing back on this. It he all he says is it has to be a cause. So that could be 1% of the reason of the firing. Let's say you just found out that the guy was a murderer. But you also suggested that transgenderism was false, meaning the theory isms, like ism is a theory, Marxism is a theory, capitalism is a theory, right? Feminism is a theory. When you're saying it is possible metaphysically to change genders and that gender is not the same thing as sex, let's say that that was 1% of the cause of the firing. 99% was you just found out the guy was a murderer. According to Gorsuch, this guy would have a Title VII claim. Okay, that's what he's saying. This comports with common sense, he says. This comports with textualism. Yeah, I'm pushing back on that. In Phillips, for example, a woman who was not hired under the employer's policy might have told her friends that her application was rejected, because she was a mother, or because she had young children. Given that many women could be hired under the policy, it's unlikely she would say that she was not hired because she was a woman. But the court did not hesitate to recognize that the employer in Phillips discriminated against the plaintiff because of her sex. Okay, I have my finger up. I'm asking a question. Justice Gorsuch, are you assuming that only women can be mothers? Isn't that the very thing called into question by transgenderism? I mean, isn't that what the court is assuming? In other words, it's assuming the very thing that the court takes for granted as true, but which completely undermines transgenderism as a theory. Uh, I'm just pointing that out. Sex wasn't the only factor. Again, we were going, okay, what? So it's 1%? How many? What percentage? What? It's so unclear here. Sex wasn't the only factor, or maybe even the main factor. Okay, so it doesn't have to be 50%. What's main mean? 40%? Is it a plurality? Is it majority? I'm going by percentages here. But it was one but for cause, and that was enough. So 1%. This is me pushing back. So all it has to be is 1% that you barely, maybe 1% of you thinks that it's necessary to be a woman to be a mother, which is common sense. So you have 1% of common sense, but you mainly don't like where she went to college and the fact that she got straight Fs. She's got a Title VII claim, according to Gorsuch. Okay, there you go. You can call the substitutes but for causation test what you will, says Gorsuch, expansive, legalistic, the dissents even dismiss it as wooden or literal, but it is the law. Is it? Is it really? Well, charitably, he says, recall that Congress can fix this. And Congress might be over there going, I'm not sure we really need to fix this, but do we really need to spell out the percentages here? Do we need to say that transgenderism is false? Gorsuch is saying, well, you can to fix what I'm saying. I think a lot of people are rolling their eyes and they're like, I think we just need to get some fresh thought in here to refute this at the judicial level because Congress can try really hard to fix this and then the judges just screw it up again. Welcome to American politics. Trying another angle, Gorsuch continues on page 745 of the Supreme Court Reporter. The defendants before us suggest that an employer who discriminates based on homosexuality or alleged, I'm going to put alleged in there, transgender status, there's that bluff again, status, doesn't intentionally discriminate based on sex as a disparate treatment claim requires. But as we've seen, an employer who discriminates against homosexual or transgender employees necessarily and intentionally applies sex-based rules. Again, you're assuming gender is the same thing as sex. An employer that announces that will not employ anyone who is homosexual, for example, intends to penalize male employees for being attracted to men. Are you assuming men and male are the same thing? Sounds like it. And female employees for being attracted to women. Are you assuming that female employees are the same as women employees? Sounds like it. That's what homo means. Homo means same in Greek. Sexual, homosexual, right? He uses the term female and women coextensively. He uses the term male here coextensively with the term men, almost as if gender and sex are the same thing. But that undermines the metaphysical assumptions of transgenderism. It's a basic problem with what he says the law is. We're going further. What then do employers mean when they insist intentional discrimination based on homosexuality or transgender status isn't intentional discrimination based on sex? Maybe the employers mean they don't intend to harm one sex or the other as a class, but as should be clear by now, the statute focuses on discrimination against individuals, not groups. Alternatively, the employers may mean they don't perceive themselves as motivated by a desire to discriminate based on sex. But nothing in Title VII turns on the employer's labels or any further intentions or motivations for its conduct beyond sex discrimination. We're now on page 1746 of the Supreme Court Reporter. In Manhart, the employer intentionally required women to make higher pension contributions only to fulfill the further purpose of making things more equitable between men and women as groups. In Phillips, the employer may have perceived itself as discriminating based on motherhood, not sex, given that its hiring policies as a whole favored women. But in both cases, the court set all this aside as irrelevant. The employer's policies involved intentional discrimination because of sex, and Title VII liability necessarily followed. Wow, that's pretty strong language. Aren't these cases different, the employers asked, given that an employer could refuse to hire? I'm not going to use the term gay. He says the word gay. I'm not going to use the word gay. I'm not playing that game. Homosexual or transgender individual without ever learning the applicant's sex. Suppose an employer asked a homosexual or transgender applicant to tick a box on its application form. Gorsuch continues, the employer then had someone else redact any information that could be used to discern sex. The resulting applications would disclose which individuals are homosexual or transgender without revealing whether they also happen to be men or women. Doesn't the transgenderism train also reject the men or women binary? Is that just me? Or are the alphabet people changing their mind on that? Well, they change their mind every other Tuesday or Wednesday regarding what else to put on their flags. So it's possible, but I'm not sure what the latest flag design that people want to fly next to the American flag and the California state flag on fire, departments and stuff like that. I don't know, but I can't keep up with all that stuff. But Gorsuch is saying the resultant applications would disclose not sex per se, but homosexuality or transgender. Doesn't that possibility indicate that the employer's discrimination against homosexual or transgender purposes cannot be sex discrimination? No, it doesn't. Even in this example, the individual applicant's sex still weighs as a factor in the employer's decision. Notice he keeps beating that drum, a factor. He says it could be a small factor, 1%, less than 1%, a quarter of 1%. And he says this is the law. Okay. it doesn't seem likely that would be the law. Change the hypothetical ever so slightly, and its flaws become apparent, Gorsuch continues. Suppose an employer's application form offered a single box to check if the application is either Black or Catholic. If the employer refuses to hire anyone who checks that box, we would conclude the employer has complied with Title VII so long as it studiously avoids learning any particular application of race or religion. Of course not. By intentionally setting out a rule that makes hiring turn on race or religion, the employer violates the law, whatever he might know or not know about individual applicants. Well, that's a very interesting analogy there, Justice Gorsuch. But the analogy fails because whether someone is Black or Catholic, those are terms that are well known and understood, even if they're a little bit improper, as the term Black is, because I've never met a Black person before, unless you redefine the term Black to mean a different color, like brown or tan or something like that. But if there is a distinction between those colors, and there is, according to the Crayola crayon box, and I think any artist would know the difference between those two. Any manufacturer of T-shirts would certainly notice the difference between those two if they have a 100% return policy, that is. But, we'll play the game of redefining terms. Fine. Those terms are related to descriptions that can be true of people, and no one is asking whether it can possibly be true of somebody. Okay. But the transgender so-called status, Justice Gorsuch, as you're putting out, is highly controversial that is even possible metaphysically. Now, we're not questioning that someone might assert that it's possible. That's not the issue. The issue is whether the bare assertion is a sufficient condition for its possibility, let alone its actuality. And there's a lot writing on this. I mean, we can't be playing games with this metaphysical impossibility. This is incoherent. You can't base a law and the application of law, liability for somebody's company, based on something that is not well understood, and very well may be misunderstood or not well understood because it's an impossibility metaphysically. These are highly contentious claims, unlike being Black or Catholic. It has nothing to do with whether you like somebody. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the bare possibility. Now, it might be that if someone is very loud about asserting impossibilities and teaching kids that, you might start to dislike that person because of their effect on kids and the lying that goes on. Maybe it's not lying, but the falsehoods that you want to protect children from. That's disanalogous from Black or Catholic. Because it seems to me that, as we've just said, the status of those terms is well understood. No one is disagreeing that Catholics exist. Everybody knows what that is. Everybody knows what a sufficient condition for being Catholic is. No one's saying that's a metaphysical impossibility to be Catholic. No one's saying that if we teach children that it's possible to be Catholic, you're somehow abusing children. No one is saying that. And the same with being black. Oh, it's a bad analogy. Let's move on. Same holds here. No, but we're continuing with Gorsuch. There is no way for an applicant to decide whether to check the homosexual or transgender box without considering sex. To see why, imagine an applicant doesn't know what the words homosexual or transgender mean. Well, okay, let's let's play that game. Gorsuch continues. Then try writing out instructions for who should check the box without using the words man, woman, or sex, or some synonym. Justice Gorsuch, please hear us here. The issue of what is a synonym for sex is the very issue in question here, challenged by transgenderism. That's the very issue. Gorsuch says it can't be done. Likewise, there is no way an employer can discriminate against those who check the homosexual or transgender box without discriminating in part because of an applicant's sex. By discriminating against homosexuals, the employer intentionally penalizes men for being attracted to men and women for being attracted to women. By discriminating against transgender persons, the employer unavoidably discriminates against persons with one sex identified at birth and another today. Any way you slice it, the employer intentionally refuses to hire applicants in part because of the affected individual's sex, even if it never learns any applicant's sex. All right. Well, I think I'm going to read Gorsuch for a while now. I've made so many comments here early on. You should be able to see through what he's saying, and you should be able to see the problems with what he's saying. You see how far we got to go here. We have quite a far ways to go here, so I'm going to start reading, just reading without commenting. And I want you to do the work of putting the comments and the criticisms in place. Next, Gorsuch says, the employers turn to Title VII's list of protected characteristics, race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Because homosexuality and transgender status can't be found on that list, and because they are conceptually distinct from sex, the employers reason they are implicitly excluded from Title VII's reach. Put another way, if Congress had wanted to address these matters in Title VII, it would have referenced them specifically. But that much does not follow, according to Gorsuch. We agree that homosexuality and transgender status are distinct concepts from sex, but as we've seen, discrimination based on homosexuality or transgender status necessarily entails discrimination based on sex. The first cannot happen without the second, nor is there any such thing as a canon of donut holes in which Congress's failure to speak directly to a specific case that falls within a more general statutory rule creates a tacit exception. Instead, when Congress chooses not to include any exceptions to a broad rule, courts apply the broad rule. And that is exactly how this court has always approached Title VII. Sexual harassment is conceptually distinct from sex discrimination, but it can fall within Title VII's sweep. Same with motherhood discrimination. Would the employers have us reverse those cases on the theory that Congress could have spoken to those problems more specifically? Of course not. As enacted, well, let me insert something here. Justice Gorsuch, maybe Congress agrees that only women can be mothers, which is exactly what is under attack from transgenderism and the alphabet people. Let that sit in there for a while. You totally missed the point there. As enacted, Title VII prohibits all forms of discrimination because of sex, however they manifest themselves or whatever labels might attach to them. Uh, that's just another way of you saying that you anything conceptually distinct from sex that the alphabet people want to throw in there gets included in the term sex. And Congress has to say otherwise. Well, Congress in 1964 would have thought you were crazy, and the alphabet people were crazy too. Because everybody knows that they were trying to protect women. That is, females. No one thought that women could just say they're a man and then they're a man all of a sudden. Why would you need the change the amendment for voting? If in order to vote, all a woman had to do is say, I'm a man now, and then go vote and then go back to being a woman. Why would you need to change the Constitution? Explain this to me like I'm a really smart 9-year-old here with a large attention span. Uh, the assumption was that women can't change. That's the whole point. That's why you need to protect them. And I'm going to quote my metaphysics professor, J.P. Moreland, a guest on this podcast. Idiot! Employers try the same point another way. Since 1964, Gorsuch continues, they observe Congress has considered several proposals to add sexual orientation to Title VII's list of protected characteristics, but no such amendment has become law. Meanwhile, Congress has enacted other statutes addressing other topics that do not discuss sexual orientation. This post enactment legislative history, they urge, should tell us something. How are you guys doing? Are you getting this? This is very important stuff. Very important. We're doing this in honor of Tom Luckey, whose funeral is happening right now at Antioch Baptist Church in Humboldt, Tennessee. It will be posted on the YouTube. Uncle Tom, we're thinking about you as we're doing this, and we would know that you're right there with us. We got our Lucky Barn hat on. We're going to continue with this. But what? There's no authoritative evidence explaining why later Congresses adopted other laws referencing sexual orientation, but didn't amend this one. Maybe some in the later legislatures understood the impact Title VII's broad language already promised for cases like ours and didn't think a revision needed. Maybe others knew about its impact, but hoped no one else would notice. Maybe still others, occupied by other concerns, didn't consider the issue at all. All we can know for certain is that Speculation about why a later Congress declined to adopt new legislation offers a particularly dangerous basis on which to rest an interpretation of an existing law a different and earlier Congress did adopt. I have no problems with what he's saying about legislative history right now, post legislative history. I don't really see a problem with what he's saying. Um, I don't think it's a slam dunk as much as he does, but it's it's not the strongest part of his argument, but it's not the weakest part either. That leaves the employers to seek a different sort of exception. Maybe the traditional and simple but for causation test should apply in all other Title VII cases, but it just doesn't work when it comes to cases involving homosexual and transgender employees. The test is too blunt to capture the nuances here. The employers illustrate their concern with an example. When we apply this simple test to Mr. Bostock, asking whether Mr. Bostock, a man attracted to other men, would have been fired had he been a woman, we don't just change his sex. Along the way, we change his sexual orientation too, from homosexual to heterosexual. If the aim is to isolate whether a plaintiff's sex caused the one moment here. I got an update that Uncle Tom's funeral is at 1 p.m. Tennessee time. It will be 11 a.m. California time today. So all of you guys who are watching this live on TikTok, all of the millions of followers that we have in Iran and China, I want you to know that you can see Uncle Tom's funeral on Antioch Baptist Church in Humboldt, Tennessee's YouTube. That will be posted later today. If you are in China and you can't get to Tennessee by 1 today, you can access it there. And for the people in Finland and New Zealand and India and I think we had a few in Kyrgyzstan or something like that that have asked me about when Uncle Tom Lucky's funeral will be. This is for you. And here's the Lucky Barn hat. Uncle Tom, we're we're um we're missing you, man. We're missing you. This is for you, buddy. This is for you, Uncle Tom. Here we go. Where was I? Okay. We were somewhere in this paragraph here. Along the way, we change his sexual orientation too, from homosexual to heterosexual. If the aim is to isolate whether a plaintiff's sex caused the dismissal, the employer's stress, we must hold sexual orientation constant, meaning we need to change both his sex and the sex to which he's attracted. Again, you're assuming sex and gender are the same thing, the very thing called into question to make transgenderism as a theory possibly coherent. Just pointing that out. So for Mr. Bostock, the question should be whether he would have been fired if he were, oh, wow. If he were a woman attracted to women. And because his employer would have been as quick to fire a lesbian as it was a gay man, again, that term gay, you mean homosexual. Homosexual. Because his employer would have been as quick to fire a lesbian as it was a gay man, the employers conclude no Title VII violation has occurred. Well, if homosexuality is an enduring trait, it's a stable trait. This is me. As we were told in the late great effort to redefine marriage. If Mr. Bostock all of a sudden decided he was a woman, wouldn't that imply that what exactly would that imply here? Because is if he's a homosexual and he's that is stable, but his gender is not. Well, doesn't that imply that he could change into a woman, but he would not be attracted to men anymore? Which makes you wonder, wait, I thought you said that the fact that he's attracted to men doesn't change. Is it the fact that he's attracted to the same sex, whatever sex he is? Is that what doesn't change? Or is it the fact that he's attracted to men no matter what sex he is? Is that the thing that never changes? It's so confusing here. And notice there's no like clarity about any of this. It's just how are employers supposed to proceed here if an employer thinks it's important to hire somebody who's not confused? I mean, how is the employer supposed to know who's being confused here? I mean, what if you don't want to hire somebody who's confused about this stuff? What if you don't want to hire somebody who lies about it? That would fit Justice Gorsuch's condition of Title VII liability because it would have some but for causation regarding some possible connection with sex. And that would make any employer who even thinks about this stuff critically liable under civil rights law. That is insane. That is an insane standard of the law. And you know what? It's false and it's a lie. I'm not saying Justice Gorsuch is lying. I'm saying somebody is. Somebody on that side is lying. I know it. I don't think Gorsuch is lying, but I think he does want to fit in with a certain crowd here. They don't like his stance on guns, but you know, he really wants to fit in here. And this is his Boulder thing talking. This is his Boulder connection talking. He's he's uh he's letting his Boulder leak out here. Boulder, Colorado. I'm glad he doesn't let it leak out on guns. Thank God. Thank God. By the way, his former mentor, Timkovich, Judge Timkovich, just had a great decision coming out of the 10th Circuit, striking down the 7-day waiting period in New Mexico for firearm transfers. Nice job, Timkovich. Nice job. One of the people that testified for Gorsuch in his hearing. And then I think it was Allison, I forget her last name, the one that Trump appointed to replace Gorsuch on the 10th Circuit. She joined, striking that 7-day waiting period down in New Mexico. And you know what? That's great because now there's a circuit split on waiting periods. Praise the Lord. Nice job, Timkovich. Nice job. Some people are doing great work in the 10th Circuit. Justice Gorsuch did some great work in the 10th Circuit. Um, I mean, we're all familiar with that. Just go to the CRS report, the Congressional Research Service report on him for when he was nominated to replace Justice Scalia. We are fans of Justice Gorsuch for the most part. He has the crack pipe in his mouth in this one, though. I mean, for some reason, it's like you're in the rough neighborhood and you see Gorsuch there on the corner and he looks a little rough and he's like, "You got, got, got any more of that but for causation?" And it's like, Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch, is that you? Can I get you some? Can I get you a cup of coffee or something? Are you hungry? And he is, of course, we're in Boulder while this is going on. If you know Boulder, there's a demon on every corner. While the explanation is new, the mistakes are the same, according to Gorsuch. The employers might be onto something if Title VII only ensured equal treatment between groups of men and women, or if the statutes applied only when sex is the sole or primary reason for an employer's challenge adverse employment action. But both of these premises are mistaken. Title VII's plain terms and our precedents don't care if an employer treats men and women comparably as groups. An employer who fires both lesbians and gay men equally, you mean homosexuals, whether men or women, doesn't diminish but doubles its liability. Just cast a glance back to Manhart, where it was no defense that the employer sought to equalize pension contributions based on life expectancy, nor does the statute care if other factors besides sex contribute to an employer's discharge decision. Mr. Bostock's employer might have decided to fire him only because of the confidence of two factors, his sex and the sex to which he is attracted, but exactly the same might have been said in Phillips, where motherhood was the added variable. Still, the employers insist something seems different here. Unlike certain other employment policies this court has addressed that harmed only women or only men, the employer's policies in the cases before us have the same adverse consequences for men and women. How could sex be necessary to the result if a member of the opposite sex might face the same outcome from the same policy? I'm going to add something here. This term, opposite sex, I want you to focus on that. Opposite sex. What does the term opposite mean to you? If a thing and its opposite are present, only two are there. At least two are there, I should say. But opposite implies two. It implies that there are two sexes. And sex is an enduring condition, as he said, and as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 seems to imply. It's not the same as religion, although religion is a protected category. It's not the same as being a veteran, although that's a protected category. Not in this statute, but it's a protected category. National origin is a static condition. That's the proper analogy with sex. You can't change your national origin. You can change which nation you are have allegiance to. You can change which nation that you like, that you enjoy, that you believe in, but you can't change your national origin. That's fixed at conception if you're pro-life, or birth if you're pro-choice. National origin and sex are the proper analogs there. And I just want you to think about that. The term opposite sex implies two sexes. There's a binary there. Everybody understands that. So why on these forms, these government forms under Biden, you see non-binary? Why do you have this crazy stuff happening? It's because Gorsuch, you're letting in incoherence. You're not questioning it. You need to question. You need to take seriously the fact that it's questioned for good reason, whether it's even metaphysically possible to change genders. That's another way of saying if it's not possible, then there is no transgender status. No one is saying it's impossible to be homosexual. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's saying it's impossible to be Catholic or be black. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's saying it's impossible to be from Cuba or to have national origin. Nobody's saying that. We're saying you can't be from a certain country and then change where you were from later based on how you feel. Or, legally speaking, based on what you assert that you feel. I'm going to keep beating that drum, man. Holy crap. What the employers see as unique isn't even unusual. Often in life and law, two but four factors combine to yield a result that could have also occurred some other way. Imagine that it's a nice day outside and your house is too warm, so you decide to open the window. Both the cool temperature outside and the heat inside are but four causes of your choice to open the window. But that doesn't change just because you also would have opened the window had it been warm outside and cold outside. In either case, no one would deny that the window is open because of outside temperature. Notice he's using these opposites: warm, hot, outside, inside. These are natural opposites, right? Right. Uh, Very strange analogy because, again, the alphabet people are denying the opposite at the same time they're affirming it, which is incoherent. Right. I mean, look, I hate it when people say look, because it's like what politicians say. Look, don't look, I don't care. But I'm going to make this point again. Justice Gorsuch, you mushed together the alphabet people in here. You mushed together the L's and the so-called G's, which are really H's, homosexual, right? Bisexuality, I'm assuming you're going to put that in there somewhere too. You got the first three letters, and then the fourth letter, the T people, and you're mushing them together and you're saying, no, they're all on the same team and it's all Title VII liability. If there's any possibility that you're critically examining the metaphysical conditions underlying the possibility and the preconditions of the possibility of changing genders, and whether that's even 1% of any consideration an employer might have for an employment decision, Again, the homosexual stuff, let's put over here. I think that's on stronger footing. I still think it's a lot weaker than what he's thinking, but I'm really nailing the transgender thing. I'm going to keep beating that drum. Keep going. We're doing this for you, Uncle Tom. Nice job. Nice job, Uncle Tom. The way you took in those kids. I want you to know that we see you. We see what you and Faye have done there in Humboldt with that Lucky Barn. And those kids. I can't remember their names. We see you, man. We're going to honor you today, Uncle Tom. In either case, no one would deny the window is open because of the temperature outside. Our cases are much the same. So, for example, when it comes to homosexual employees, male, sex, and attraction to men are but four factors that can combine to get them fired. The fact that female sex and attraction to women can also get an employee fired does no more than show the same outcome can be achieved through the combination of different factors. In either case, though, sex plays an essential but for role. Now you're using the term essential. That's a loaded term. Can it be possible for 1% of a factor of an employment decision to be essential? You've already said, Justice Gorsuch, that essential here doesn't seem to mean primary or main. What's essential mean here? And by the way, here's the rub here, man. This is one of the worst parts is that another protected category is religion. And many religious people, not all, but many, think critically and might be disposed because of Christian philosophy or religious philosophy of some kind, Jewish maybe, to look at transgenderism critically and to make employment decisions based on that. You've just said that you've now identified a possible but for causation link with Title VII liability for that employer. Just because they're thoughtful in their religious tradition. So now you got a fight between two protected categories. Who wins this fight? And on one side is a thoughtful person who's trained in metaphysics, and the other side is some guy that's lying about his gender. Who wins that fight in court? By the way, I'm not saying that necessarily talking about religious people in the Christian tradition or the Judeo-Christian tradition. I mean, anybody who's thoughtful in metaphysics, maybe you don't go to church. Maybe you don't say you are a Christian. Maybe you say that you're agnostic or something. Maybe you're part of the American Humanist Association. And maybe you subscribe to Prometheus book catalog and you get Prometheus book catalogs in the mail. And you have a copy of John Dewey's A Common Faith in your bathroom for when you go number 2. Not for toilet paper, but for reading. Maybe you have a copy of the Humanist Manifesto from 1933 there next to your calendar on your fridge. Maybe you've got a photo of Torcaso versus Watkins, 1961, laid out more or less like a centerfold in your garage next to your tools, highlighting specifically footnote 11, which says that secular humanism is a religion, according to the Supreme Court. And John Dewey wouldn't disagree. A Common Faith, that's the title of his book, A Common Faith. 1933 Humanist Manifesto says it's a religious worldview. Who wins that fight, Justice Gorsuch? A lot of those guys study metaphysics. They don't like metaphysics, or they want to reduce it to something physical, but they might have a real question about this transgenderism stuff too. What about them? Just bringing up possibilities. At bottom, how much more do we have of this? We have a little bit left. We have 2 more paragraphs. Can you believe it? We're almost done. At bottom, the employer's argument unavoidably comes down to a suggestion that sex must be the sole or primary cause of an adverse employment action for Title VII liability to follow. And as we've seen, that suggestion is at odds with everything we know about the statute. Consider an employer eager to revive the workplace gender roles of the 1950s. He enforces a policy that he will hire only men as mechanics and only women as secretaries. When a qualified woman applies for a mechanic position and is denied, the simple test immediately spots the discrimination. A qualified man would have been given the job. I hire men. You don't give me work and I don't give you pay. I hire men. Remember McClintock, John Wayne? Remember that? I didn't give you a job. You earned it. All right, never mind. Given the job, so sex was a but-for cause of the employer's refusal to hire. By the way, in that McClintock scene, I think that's John Wayne talking to his real son, Patrick Wayne, I believe, which is interesting. Anyway, keep going. A qualified man would have been given the job. So sex was a but-for cause of the employer's refusal to hire. But like the employers before us today, this employer would say not so fast. By comparing the woman who applied to be a mechanic to a man who applied to become a mechanic, we've quietly changed 2 things: the applicant's sex and her trait of failing to conform to 1950s gender roles. The simple test thus overlooks that it is really the applicant's bucking of 1950s gender roles, not her sex, doing the work. We're on 1749. So we need to hold that second trait constant instead of comparing the disappointed female applicant to a man who applied for the same position. The employer would say we should compare her to a man who applied to be a secretary. And because that job seeker would be refused too, this must not be sex discrimination. Last paragraph. So no one thinks that, says Justice Gorsuch. So the employers must scramble to justify deploying a stricter causation test for use only in cases involving discrimination based on sexual orientation or transgender status. Such a rule would create a curious discontinuity in our case law, to put it mildly. Employer hires based on sexual stereotypes, simple test. Sexual stereotypes. Oh, brother. Employer te- employer sets pension contributions based on sex, simple test. Employer fires men who do not behave sufficiently masculine way around the office, simple test. But when that same employer discriminates against women who are attracted to women, or persons identified at birth as women who later identify as men, listen to this language. Persons identified at birth as women. I don't know anybody that looks at a baby and says that's a woman. Is that me? Very strange. Very strange. Do you have a boy or girl? I didn't have either. I had a woman. We are so grateful for our baby woman. Celebrate with me with a cigar. My wife just had a woman. Guys, don't be afraid to push back when the language doesn't make sense. Don't be afraid. They're just people. My Uncle Danny, when I was waiting to go in the boot camp, Navy boot camp, I was a little nervous. I was 18, I was young. It's a big bureaucracy. You're giving your life to a process of training. The Navy boot camp kicked off over 2 years of training for me. Actually, more like 3 years of training. Man, almost 3 years of training. Yeah, because I think I got my wings. I got my aircrew wings 3 years later. So from start to finish, 3 years of training. And a lot of that was on the job training. But 2 years was, going through pretty hard schools, really hard schools, some of the hardest in the military. Very difficult training. The attrition rate was very high. I'm very lucky to have lasted. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to serve. And I was nervous, man. I was nervous. My Uncle Danny, Vietnam vet, he was in combat. Saw some pretty scary and horrible things. He said they're just people. Uncle Danny, I want to acknowledge that you said that. Thank you so much for that. That really helped me. I hung on to that. They're just people. And when I was going through my language training, very intense language training, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day in Chinese, they're just people. They're just people. When the Navy SEALs were yelling at me, they're just people. They're just people. Justice Gorsuch is just a person. He's very powerful as a judge, as a federal judge, and that is the constitutional term in Article 3. He can be wrong, and I'm telling you here he is wrong. And so when you see language identified at birth, Okay. And who later identify. Well, hold on a second. Who has the authority to do this identification thing? What is the basis of this authority? Notice it's other people, and then he changes it to the person identifying himself. What's going on there? Notice he doesn't say persons identified at birth as women who later are identified as men. He doesn't keep that language. He gives agency to the person who was born to identify. Why is that? See, this is exactly what people are confused about, and it's because it's confusing. It's not obvious what you're talking about here. And it wouldn't make a big deal if Title VII liability wasn't hanging in the air over here. We suddenly roll out a new and more rigorous standard. Why are these reasons for taking sex into account different from all the rest? Title VII's text can offer no answer. Now, we're in B now. We're going to get to B later. Roman numeral 3B. But I want you to be confident here, because though he's threatening Title VII liability across the country for even thinking critically about transgenderism, which in other words means thinking critically about metaphysics of sex and gender, and making deployment decisions in part based on your philosophy training or theology training or your ethics training, whatever you're bringing to bear, logic, just critical textual analysis, hermeneutics. Um, if there's a problem with that, and there is, he's saying Congress can change it. Yes, that's true. I suppose Congress can fix the mistake that judges made here. That's true. Um, Congress has a lot on its plate, and it needs. It's a tricky thing for Congress to fix something that a judge did. Put a lot of effort into fixing it, and then you don't do other things that you need to be doing, and then a judge screws it up again. So there's risk in this. There is a separation of powers thing here going on. We do have to win hearts and minds on this issue to get majorities in Congress to fix this, but we also need to have the right judges in there. It's great that Justice Gorsuch is on the right side with guns. He's on the right side with the administrative state. See his Gutierrez uh, decision in the 10th Circuit. We are grateful for his pushback on Chevron deference and all that stuff. And we in general like him, but this is a disaster. And I cannot wait to get to the dissents to fill in what they're saying. We're going to get to Roman numeral B, Roman numeral 3B next time. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor, this special edition dedicated to Uncle Tom Luckey of Humboldt, Tennessee, and all the people he leaves behind, his sister Carol, Susan, Beth, his daughter Alexis, son Jackson, who ironically is not Jack's son, his brother Jack, who didn't have a son, but who lives near Jackson or maybe in Jackson. This is getting confusing. And of course, many nieces and nephews, cousins, and the new children. I don't know their name. And an ex-wife, Tina, and his current wife, at least of last week, Faye, who's probably feeling this the most intensely of anybody. So we enjoyed all of our time with you, Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom was I think the most friendly member of the Luckey family, at least to me, JH, when he was around, used to cut up a bit with us. Um, so I'm not really including JH in this analysis, but um, Chad was pretty friendly too for a while there. But and of course, Carol and Ralph have been very warm to us the last few trips. We miss Grandsan. She was probably the most friendly to us. We had some time with her in Hawaii when she came out, and time with her in Memphis at her place. Um, of course, no one can compare with Dot Luckey, who dragged me out to Union University, where JH was a board member, and Jackson, and knocked on old David Dockery's door. David Dockery comes over with rubbing his eyes, looked like he just got up from a nap, and he's got his cardigan on, and he's like, "Okay, how can I help you, Dot? Oh, Dot, hey, how's it going?" But Tom's the only guy that took us to a gun store. He took us out to lunch and then went right to a gun store right after that, across the street, and uh, we had a great time at the Lucky Barn. So, our hearts are there with everybody there in Humboldt. Even though we can't be there in person, our hearts are there. Our spirits are with you. Faye, I know you got a lot of work to do with all those animals, and you got a lot to do with these kids. And so we're thinking about you. We're hoping that you get a lot of support. We're hoping that people there in Humboldt and Jackson are thinking seriously about their spiritual condition. Where are you at with the Lord? Now, I'm not asking, are you going to church? That's not what I asked. Where are you with the Lord? You know that all men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's no one righteous, no, not one. You cannot bridge that gap with a holy God by yourself. The Lord Jesus did that for you. The wages of sin are death, but the gift of God is eternal life. If you believe it, you can receive that gift. You can cry out to the Lord, and he will save you. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. It's 21 August 2025, years after Jesus. We'll see you next time.